All right. For you that I have not met yet, my name is Sean Coyan. Eh, Uh, it's my pleasure to come here and continue on with our series on relationships. This week we're going to be talking about what relationships should look like with our friends. So I'm just going to jump right in. When I first sat down to start doing this teaching, to be honest, the first thing that came to mind was Facebook friends. When I think of friends, unfortunately, and how there's so much emphasis put on who we are connected with online. I know a lot of you spend a lot of your time on social networking sites, such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and whatever the latest and greatest one is that I probably don't know about. And I tend to see a lot of you on your phones, probably just about as much as I don't see you on your phones. I know that's the first thing that most of you did when you came back from the gym was check your phones. So, yeah. But I know that society kind of puts a big emphasis on how connected you are with others on social media. But to be honest, it's irrelevant how many friends you have or how many followers you have or even how long your longest streak is. Unfortunately, this is becoming more and more the standard of how we base how popular or connected we are with others and people in the world. Thinking that the more followers we have or the number of likes on a picture we have means that we are important to or valued by others. When in actuality, those experiences with social media, social networking, are actually leading us farther and farther away from true intimate connections with other people. And they're actually leaving us with vague and empty relationships that are filled with unrealistic expectations that you'll never be able to live up to. You'll never be able to meet the standard that your friends show through their pictures and through their news feeds. It's just not possible because you don't get to see behind the pictures of what their lives really are looking like. Friendships built through your phones will never be a replacement for the friendships that you're going to be able to develop face to face, like us old timers had to when we were younger. So I think it's important to first consider the type of person that we're needing to be seeking out to build relationships with. We need to, if we're going to build long-lasting, meaningful relationships, we need to do it with someone that is heading in the same direction as we are. If you are a believer and follower in Christ, the person or people that you choose to be closest to need to be able to share those same beliefs with. To be able to be kind of working towards the same goal, which would be obviously eternity in heaven. So, as Proverbs 12:26 says, "The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray." And in 13:20, "Walk with the wise and become wise, associate with fools and get into trouble." And there's a common saying that also says that if you are to show me your friends, I can show you your future. It seems to be very true. I heard that from a young age, and I'm no longer at a young age, and now I can say that from that experience in my life that is a true statement. So if you are to be hanging out and building relationships with people that are heading in the direction of destruction, it's most likely that you're going to share that experience with them. And I'm not trying to say that if your current friends are not believers, that you have to just cut ties with them and move on. But if they really are your friends and they're worth your time and possibly being your best friend, then it's your obligation to present them with the hope and the purpose that you live for. But if they're not willing to open up and share that experience with you, then you might need to re-examine how dedicated you are with them and maybe invest into some people that will be more like-minded. My example of this would be when I was in high school, probably sophomore year. I learned about a guy that moved in a couple miles away from me. I know you guys haven't been able to hear my testimony that I did for the high school, but I grew up out in the middle of the country, in the middle of nowhere, and This new friend that moved in a couple of miles away was an opportunity for me because I could ride my bicycle over there and get to know him. What I didn't know was all the things that this friend was going to introduce me to. He quickly introduced me to alcohol and drugs, and strongly influenced me to be pursuing physical relationships with females. And I think that if I would have been more cautious about choosing him as a friend, I could have probably avoided a lot of the mistakes that I made and a lot of the years of hardships that I went through, the difficult years of my life. So let's move forward. Let's look at how to be a good friend. One important command to being a good friend comes from Christ himself. In Luke 6:31, he says, "Do to others as you would have them do to you." So all the ways that you want your friends to treat you, you need to be treating them. And not waiting on them to do it in the first place, but to take initiative and start treating people how you would like them to treat you. And if you do that, you might be surprised by the response that you get. Moving forward, there's many characteristics that are needed to be a good friend to someone, and we're going to take a look at a few of them. The first one is loyalty. The story of Job in the Old Testament is a good example of what a biblical friendship should look like and the dedication to one another we should have. So pretty much where we find Job is after Satan has had his way with him, and he was literally sitting in despair, having lost all of his property, all of his children, even his own health. Is at that point that his friends heard about the condition that he was, and they decided to come together from a far distance off and to come and just be by his side and sit in the ashes of what was left of his life. They came and sat with him and didn't say a word, but were just there to comfort him and to be there for him. We need to adopt this example into our own lives. And when we have friends that are hurting, either from losing a family member or being depressed or whatever, there are a multitude of things that could cause someone to be down. We need to go and be by their side and support them, sometimes without even saying a word, but just to be present in their life. We need to be committed to them for who they are and not what they will be or what they can do for us. The second thing is humility. Philippians 2:3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself." This means be selfless in all your actions and consider your friends more valuable than yourself. Instead of saying me first, humility allows us to say, "No, friend, you first." There's many ways that we can humble ourselves before our friends. One of them would be, just as simple as allowing them to go before us in line, to have the better seat, to eat before us, to you name it. Putting them above yourself is humility. One other thing is that we can make sure that we go more than half the distance to meet their needs. We don't have to wait for them to come to us, but we can go to them. Thirdly is trust. Proverbs 19:20. Listen to advice and accept instruction so that you may gain wisdom in the future. Build a trusting friendship where you are able to connect with one another and keep each other accountable for each other's actions. This means being able to speak truth into each other's lives. Whenever your friend is calling you out for your misdeeds, or whenever you are maybe falling away from Christ a bit, you need to be able to trust him, to be able to speak truth into your life, and to know that they are not going to lead you farther away. And in the same way, your friends should be able to trust you to speak truth into their lives and make sure that they know where they stand and what it looks like from the outside. You also need to be able to earn their trust. And just one simple example of that is to not gossip about your friends. That means don't go and tell all your friends' secrets to everyone in the school. Don't say anything that they wouldn't themselves say to people around you. I know that gossip is a quick way to end friendships and is very relevant to your age, hopefully. But Mutual submission is the last thing. Ephesians 5:21 is submit to one another out of reverence of Christ. In essence, we are to lay aside our rights and humbly serve one another in love. And this goes against everything that the world tells us about what we need to be striving for in our lives. Instead of being out to get the best for us and put ourselves above everyone else, it means that we should be able to put others before ourselves, in everything that we do. As Proverbs 18:19 says, an offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. So when we commit to arguments between each other and offend one another, it causes distance in our relationships. So being able to have the difficult conversations and deal with conflict in a manner that allows both sides to feel valued and respected will keep from having a division formed between you and your friends. And if a division is created, you need to be willing to submit or concede your differences to mend the relationship. So to not always have to be right and find middle ground. So these are a few of the characteristics that apply to being a good friend, but we all also have our own needs that have to be met. I mean, there's a multitude of things that good friends do for each other. We need to take time to figure out what we need out of our friends and be able to find peers and invest in them so that they can fulfill those needs, and at the same time be able to discover what our gifts are and be able to give them to the people in need around us. So that was how to be a friend. So now let's talk about how not to. And to start this, I have a question for you to ask yourself about your friends, and that is, are they friends of the flesh, or do they pursue worldly pleasures? When we surround ourselves with friends that are pursuing the things of this world, they often lead us away from the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Any of you in small groups on Sunday nights? Any of you know what James 4:4 is? No? What? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good job. So, I mean, it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with my lesson. I just thought of it, so I figured I'd challenge and see if anybody knew it. But yeah, pretty much don't be friends with the world. So often we settle for friendships based on society's standards, which again leave us with shallow, meaningless relationships that often take on the throwaway mentality that is applied to many other areas of our lives as well. Do not settle what the world has to offer in a friend, but continually seek out the friends that God intends us to have. As Pastor Lucas, or as he told me he'd rather be referred to as a wise and handsome pastor, told me in a recent conversation, friendship is about the road you are on, not the room you are in. This means that we should be pursuing relationships with peers that are heading towards the same destination as we are. Not choosing friends just because we are around them a lot, that we play the same sports, that we are in the same class and sit by each other every day, or that we share the same hobbies. Oftentimes, when we base friends based on our interests, when we get older, our interests change, and we can't expect our friends' interests to match ours, which in turn causes conflict. And this is so when we move into different rooms of our life, which is different interests or different hobbies, or just growing away from our friends, the walls from those rooms are what keeps us from staying close. So only when we are able to be on the same road as our friends that we can expect to see them at the end of the journey. And I had to throw in journey because I was wearing a journey shirt. So other ways to not be a friend include being critical of their actions or words that your friends may say. None of us are perfect. We will make mistakes, we will say stupid things, and we will upset our friends. I know all of you probably know how difficult it is to resist peer pressure and how hard it is to make the right choice when all the attention is on you. So don't expect your friends to be perfect. We all will say things that will hurt each other, but we need to be able to show grace and forgiveness to each other and be able to work through those conflicts without having to completely cut ties with the people that we've invested time in. This goes a lot along with the mutual submission and the loyalty that I was talking about earlier. Another negative trait might be that you only spend time with your friends whenever they have something you want. A lot of people would call this using somebody. We all have friends that only seem to come around when we have something they want. Don't be that friend. They're not pleasant. Instead, reach out to your friends, talk to them, show interest in them without having an ulterior motive, and just be genuinely concerned in who they are and where they're at in life. And lastly, how not to be a friend is that you need to be consistent in who you are. If you change your personalities based on where you're at, it's going to be very difficult for you to build trust because nobody's going to know who they're really talking to. If you're one person here at youth group, another person at school, and another person at ground house, how is anybody ever really going to know who you really are? I'm going to encourage you to really be the you that Christ is calling you to be, no matter where you are at. This will allow others to see him through you more clearly. And so I've mentioned how to be a friend, how not to be a friend. And at one point, I was talking about how to avoid building close relationships with non-believers and peers that are lost. So does this mean that we just write them off and just stick with ourselves, with our holy huddles of people that are like-minded and fellow believers? Of course not. Does anybody know what the GC squared stands for on all of our youth group shirts? Yo. No. The GC squared. Anybody else? Yeah, Holly. Yeah, and what is those? Or what are those? Yeah, so, yeah, to love others and to make disciples. So, how are we ever going to succeed in fulfilling that mission if we're constantly keeping to ourselves? Instead, we need to band together with our friends and seek out the peers that are lost and fallen away. This is done by building up relationships with those that God surrounds us with. And we build up relationships with our actions by loving on them and by showing genuine concern and care for them. And when the opportunity comes, whenever you're able to talk about your faith and your beliefs with them, it's important to ask questions about what they believe and why they believe it. And often you'll find out that allows them to let down their guard and actually talk to you about their faith. And it also gives you an opportunity to tell them what you believe and why you have the hope and belief that you have. It's important that we do this with other friends. That way we can help hold each other accountable. Galatians 6:1 kind of puts it this way. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. That is why it's important to seek out others in a pair. Like I said, to keep each other accountable and support each other when hard questions arise. Lasting change requires biblical friendships. So continually encourage those around you to be more like Christ. With all this being said, there's only one thing left that needs to be addressed, and that's what Jesus has to say about friendship. In John 15:12-15, he says, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you." Wow. Is there anyone here that would be willing to lay down your life for your friend? I think you might have a struggle with that. I know that I would. But Jesus didn't struggle with that. He laid down his life for each and every one of you. And if you're willing to accept and believe that fact, his death gives you an extraordinary opportunity. to be friends with God as well as be the beneficiary of enough grace and mercy to cover everything that you have done or that you will do in your life that would cause any other friend to abandon you. If this is something that you would desire in your life, I hope that you would talk to any one of the leaders here tonight. And I personally guarantee that no other friendship in this lifetime will ever compare to the awesomeness that is being friends with Christ. Jesus has sent you a friend request. You just have to decide if you want to accept or ignore it. That's it. So we have about 15 minutes. I think I'd like to break into some groups real quick. I just have some discussion questions we can discuss in the